Chapter 2. Trudging along in the snow for another hour wasn't what Saria had planned when she had thought of going on daring quests to help others. Once more, she was frozen, and despite her silence, Yarlin and Mira were doing enough grumbling for everyone. At first, the adventure hadn't seemed so bad. Barely a few hundred meters out of the town, Mira had urged Yarlin to make her a torch. She had then done the most unexpected thing, belching flames onto it to light it. Saria's eyes had widened in shock. Mira was the first Dragonborn she'd spent any time with, and none of the previous exposures to the race had shown anything so bizarre. Of course, it made some sense. Dragons breathed fire. But belching it? If she hadn't heard Andorn chuckle quietly, so only she could hear, she'd not have suspected it was out of the ordinary, even for the Dragonborn. When she continued to walk near the back of the group and allow the others to lead, she'd noticed Andorn had fallen in beside her, their silence more companionable than most, until a few meters had opened up between them and the other three, all hurrying along and making shapes in the snow. "You don't appear to be used to this sort of thing," Andorn said quietly. She shrugged, not sure what information to offer. It was true. She'd only left home a few months earlier, and snow like this was a new experience. But she wasn't a youngling with no experience of the world at all. "I mean no offense," he added. "And I don't mean to pry either. We all carry secrets and have things we prefer to leave in our pasts. It's part of what makes us set out on adventures like this. But if you ever wish to ask questions, to learn more of the world without judgment or ridicule, I would be happy to assist." For a moment, she glanced across at his face, turned just enough toward her that she could see it within the hood he wore. His countenance was enough to convince her that his offer was genuine. She nodded her thanks in the elven way, aware it would be the most respectful way to respond to a half-elf. Too many treated his kind with disdain, refusing to acknowledge the heritage they shared and focusing only on their differences. He responded in kind, a small smile playing across his face and lighting up his eyes. Feeling a little calmer, Saria exhaled and listened to the others up ahead talking of similar things. As they came to a particularly wide snowdrift across the path, blown there by a gap in the trees and the crosswind it allowed, the party grouped again, and Saria had the amusement of seeing Mira tackle the problem with more fire, barely missing the dwarf and Yarlin as they stepped forward to push through it with nothing but brute force.
"A little warning would be helpful,"
Thorgrim said, doing his best to sound polite despite the cuss he had let out only a moment before. It only made Mira chuckle, the fire flickering as she did.
"Probably best if we just give our little pyromaniac a wide berth,"
Yarlin replied, watching the snow melt from the sheer volume of heat coming out of her. "I did tell you I liked fire," she added once the job was done. This gained a sudden stomach-shaking laugh from the burly sailor, and even some amused chuckles from the rest of the party. Yarlin clapped her on the back, catching her by surprise and sending a small plume of flames from her nose and mouth one final time. This only had Mira and him laughing all the harder. Perhaps this isn't so bad after all, Saria found herself thinking. There were far worse people to be out in the snow with than those who could breathe fire and melt it all away in only a few minutes, not to mention how long it had been since she had last heard herself laugh. The good vibes ended there. Barely another 100 feet along the road they came to a halt, evident wheel tracks and spots of blood veering off down a rutted track into the forest.
"Well, now we know why the wagon didn't arrive,"
Yarlin said as he drew his sword.
"Looks like we're going to have to reclaim it from someone."
Saria felt a small shiver of fear run through her. So far, she had not actually had to fight another person for any reason. She had earned a few coin helping out here and there, and she knew how to use the bow she carried, always making light work of finding food or fending off aggressive animals like bears and wolves. But this would be something different, something far darker.
"Let me lead the way, ladies. You tuck in behind and ready those ranged weapons."
Yarlin flipped both her and Mira a wink before he set off down the track, evidently unconcerned about what might be ahead. "It's likely to be kill or be killed," Andorn whispered as he slowed his pace, his eyes never leaving the route ahead and the tracks they followed. She nodded, knowing it was meant to comfort, not frighten her. Part of her very much hoped to find the wagon abandoned, however. As they continued, the tracks grew more obvious and easier to follow, and the signs of blood fewer as whoever was injured received treatment or any wounds closed on their own. The snow was deeper, the sun unable to get underneath the cover of the evergreen trees and thaw it, but the horse had continued to plod along, led by several booted feet. With an arrow in one hand and her bow ready to string, Saria took deliberate step after deliberate step, noticing the half-elf beside her managed to move even more quietly, with even more grace than she had ever managed. It was almost entirely unnecessary, as when they rounded the next corner, Yarlin paused, put his fingers to his lips before motioning for them to slow as well. The party walked the last few paces, and the wagon finally came into view. 3 muscular men in scruffy winter clothes were standing near the horse, one trying to pull the reins and encourage the nervous creature to leave the path. The horse snorted and stamped, throwing its head and refusing to budge. No clear path in the direction they were trying to lead it. An argument broke out between the 3 men as they realized the wagon and horse were going no farther. The supplies were all still clearly in the wagon, and the unmistakable signs of several dead, or at least unconscious bodies, plainly visible. "They seem oblivious to us," Andorn whispered just loud enough for the group to hear.
"Good. Means we can surprise them."
"We'll need to get closer to use ranged weapons, well,"
the dwarf replied gruffly, pulling out his crossbow.
"We've got to be a good couple of 100 feet away still."
"Perhaps, but I'm no sneak. I'll give you a moment if you want to try and get a bit closer, but they notice us, and I'm going to charge."
Yarlin readied his sword and set his jaw, looking more serious than he had since they'd all met. Saria had to stop herself laughing at the macho display. No doubt he could do some damage if he wanted to, but the 3 ruffians wouldn't be easy prey for sure. "Come," Andorn whispered to her. "Let us creep a little closer, you and I."
"Me too. I can't breathe fire from all the way back here,"
Mira replied before Saria could, falling in on the other side of her. Trying to quell the flip-flopping of her stomach, she concentrated on each step, moving in time with her 2 companions until they had taken 1/5 of the gap away. Andorn paused then, glancing backwards. She did the same to see both Thorgrim and Yarlin following, their armor far noisier by default and making the sneaking significantly less effective. As they attempted to sneak, taking long-legged strides that looked out of place for both of them, she had to fight to stop yet another laugh. They looked ridiculous. Her attention was brought back to the task ahead of her as Andorn pulled his bow tight, getting ready to loose his first arrow. She copied him but didn't get any closer, staying back with Mira, her longbow within a range she felt confident would hit already. She had less confidence in her ability to sneak than her ability to shoot. The argument aided their cause, however, with 2 of the men still bickering over what to do with the cargo, while the 3rd pulled a sack off the side of the wagon, evidently trying to ignore them. But as Yarlin tripped on something behind them, setting his armor jangling and snow falling off a tree, he gave the game away. Immediately, the entire party sprang into action. Andorn rushed forward just enough to loose an arrow and hit the nearest thug square in one shoulder. This gave Saria the push she needed to copy him, her arrow catching the same man in the side as Thorgrim rushed forward and joined her. Before her eyes, Mira waved her hands and sent out 3 bright dart-like lights at the same would-be thief, each one thudding into his chest, making him shudder with the impact before fizzling out. Saria raised her eyebrows, having never seen anything like it, but Andorn's notching an arrow helped her focus. She did the same, reaching for the stash in the quiver on her shoulder. By now, Yarlin and the thugs had recovered from their surprise, and they all rushed towards each other. One of the men yelling something that sounded like Kenton, a human name. Saria gulped as Andorn finished off the first thug, his second arrow piercing a vital organ that downed the man. She adjusted her aim at the last moment to the one calling for help. Standing her ground, she kept shooting, watching the others dash around her until Andorn, Yarlin, and Thorgrim formed a protective line. Andorn's bow dropped to his feet in favor of a rapier he wielded so fast, darting it in and out of his cloak so only the quickest eyes could see and evade its stabs and cuts. Within seconds, the second thug had been stabbed, shot, and engulfed in a jolt of fire that flew from Mira's hands. It appeared the Dragon Born Sorcerer could make fire with more than just her breath, but the man continued on for a little longer. Eventually, he went down, also at Andorn's hands, blood spurting from a wound across the chest, spraying the otherwise white snow. As Yarlin engaged with the third, another appeared from the edge of the forest and charged. Saria stepped sideways to get a good shot on the third and help Yarlin as they traded blows. Yarlin's longsword struggling to block the quick mace attacks and retaliate with any precision. The whole party teamed up on the third attacker, ignoring the extra for now, but Yarlin was hit, a sickening crunch adding to the battle sounds as he staggered back. Saria tried not to flinch or hesitate at the damage Yarlin took, his arm now hanging crookedly, instead keeping the rain of arrows until Andorn distracted the thug long enough Yarlin could finish him off. That left the new arrival, a more burly-looking man with a feather in his hat. The man in charge? Saria wondered as she shot at him anyway. With just one foe left, Mira moved into close combat, opening her mouth and breathing fire on the man. With the added sword attacks from Yarlin and Andorn, the man lasted mere seconds before he joined his companions, dead on the ground. Lowering her bow, Saria felt a shudder run through her. The snow that had been crisp and white before was now stained by blood, sprays arching back from every long cut and splashes from where arrows had gone right through bodies. Forced to look away for a moment and compose herself, she managed to gather her thoughts. A neigh from the scared horse pulling the wagon aided her, giving her a focal point as she moved closer. The last few steps she took slowly, reaching out a hand to stroke the horse's nose. It pulled away once, tossing its head until her soothing noises and gentle approach won the creature over.
"Looks like we have our very own horse whisperer,"
Mira said. Saria turned as she took the reins and gently held the horse in place. The sorceress was grinning at her. Just to one side of her, Thorgrim had placed his hands on Yarlin's injured arm. As he chanted, a warm-looking light glowed from his palms, surrounding the broken skin and boned until it slowly moved back into place, setting as if it had never been damaged.
"Cheers, mate,"
Yarlin said, giving his weapon a swing with the hand that had only been able to hang limp a moment before.
"Good as new."
Thorgrim merely nodded and went to look for the bolts he'd fired, gathering Saria's arrows for her as he did. He managed to retrieve half, the rest too broken or embedded in bodies to be worth returning to her quiver. Andorn already moved among the bodies, checking for a heartbeat in each before patting them down for money. On the more senior-looking ruffian, he found a leather pouch and stood reading the contents while the money they had found was pooled into Yarlin's hands.
"Well, that more than makes up for a trip in the snow for a couple of hours,"
Yarlin said, a glint in his eye and a grin on his face as he held up a gold coin.
"Drinks are on these lads when we get back."
"We might want to delay," Andorn replied, holding up the letter. This one was expecting to meet at a rendezvous point at full moon for further orders.
"Someone was behind this, then?"
Saria asked, her blood running cold and making her shiver once more. "Probably. Why else would the supplies be targeted by an organized group on a road normally guarded?" Andorn said the words slowly and evenly, like it was the most logical thought in the world. Another shudder tore through her at the thought of a world so cruel that people could set out to kill others and ruin livelihoods with such deliberation.
"It appears we have two choices,"
Thorgrim said, once they were all gathered together around Saria and the wagon.
"Take the wagons back and follow our trail in the morning, or follow it now and hope we return to get the wagon to the townspeople." "Well, I can say for sure I've had enough of this cold, and I've got a thirst for a good ale,"
Yarlan replied without missing a beat, holding up the coin they'd looted from the dead thugs as he did.
"It's cold out here and getting late."
Mira sounded eager, echoing Saria's thoughts and allowing her to nod with what she agreed to. "Although I do not wish to leave the trail too long, we can mark the beginning on this tree here." Andorn used his blade to slash at the bark, forming two sides of a triangle before creating the crossbar that turned it into an A.
"Then it seems we're all in agreement. The supplies should be escorted where they are needed, and the poor men who tried to deliver it given a decent burial and service."
Thorgrim hopped up onto the wagon as he spoke, and Saria gladly gave the reins over to him, letting him take charge.
"I'm sure I'd benefit from a sleep in a good bed, too,"
Mira added, yawning the last word. Although she'd covered her mouth with her hand, an eerie glow came from the recesses, lighting up her skin and making it clear the fire inside her was still burning brightly. It almost made Saria bold enough to ask how she could breathe fire like a dragon and not incinerate herself, but she didn't dare. They didn't know each other that well. Footsore and eager to put her first bloody battle behind her, Saria followed her companions back to the village and up to a bed. Perhaps she'd let them investigate the reason behind the attack without her. She wasn't sure she had a taste for all this killing.